Welcome back to the exciting book of Genesis. Hallelujah. All right, we're moving right along. We're in chapter 19, y'all. Only 31 more chapters to go. Okay, but we're making our way on through. All right, so today we're going to take a look at Genesis, and that is chapter 19. All right, now, I want you to know Genesis 19 speaks of two witnesses that are sent to Sodom. You know, and what I want to point out is we're going to take a look at Genesis 19, sure enough, but we're going to take a look at it through some alternate pair of lenses. The lenses that we're going to look at Genesis 19 through is going to be the lenses of the typology that's set forth within the book. Amen? You know, because that's what's going to speak to us in the here and now. You know, now, please feel free to read over Genesis 19 for the historical aspect as well. You know, history is a beautiful thing, especially Yah's history, because Yah's history is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen? Amen. You know, so knowing that that is the case, and knowing that he truly told the end from the beginning, when we see the beginning, we're learning about the end. And seeing that we're towards the end, I want to understand, and I want you all to understand what's to happen in the end. Amen? Amen. All right, so that's the lenses that we're looking through this through. So as we go through Genesis 19, I want you to always keep in the forefront of your mind, you know, the correlation betwixt the two witnesses of Revelation. Now, the only difference is it's like first the natural, then the spiritual, right? Mm-hmm. So when this happened, the historical account happened in the natural, but the spiritual aspect is going to happen, you know, and you know, from the fleshly viewpoint, a lot of the things can look opposite, you know, just like when the Messiah came, you know, and you know, he was the son of David, but yet he seemed to be very timid. He seemed to be very non-aggressive, you know, to say the least, you know, in the natural. But in the spiritual, and I pray that Yah gives me time to do this lesson one day, to show Yahshua, you know, the conquering king. You know, because when he came, he was a warrior. He was a conquering king, and he did conquer. But it was all in the spiritual realm. And so in the physical realm, it looked like, you know, it looked a whole different way. But in the spiritual realm, he was kicking butt and taking names. You know, and nobody seems to recognize that. You know, but he was casting out spirits. He was slaying them left and right. He was truly a warrior. And guess what? All of those that was with him, they were warriors as well. You know, but in the spiritual realm. So in the physical realm, it looked as though, you know, they were nonviolent because they were nonviolent physically. You know, but having said that, when we take a look at these two witnesses in the natural, you know, it's going to differ a bit when the spiritual application comes because of that. You know, so I want you to keep that in mind. So that being said, let's jump right in. Let me have my first reader read Genesis 19:1.
And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground.
All right, so first thing that we're told is there came two angels to Sodom. Now, I want you to keep in mind what we learned in the previous lessons. Sodom represents, anyone? Yes. Jerusalem, absolutely. Sodom represents Jerusalem. Okay, so we see two angels or two witnesses going to Jerusalem. You know, now it just so happens that this is prophesied to come in Revelations. In Revelations 11:3-4 it says, "And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the Elohim of the earth." Okay? Okay, so what I want you to know and understand, okay, you may say, well, it says 2 witnesses here, but it says 2 angels in Genesis 19. But you have to understand the reason that these 2 angels were sent to Sodom, and that was to bear witness as to whether or not the wickedness that was that the cry thereof was making its way up to Yah was in fact so or not. All right? Okay, so these 2 angels and 2 witnesses are synonymous. Okay? Now, also, if we jump down to Revelation 11, 7 and 8 teaches us, it says, and when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom in Egypt, where also our Adonai was crucified. So we know this to be Jerusalem, right? Okay, now, what I want you to see is what's going to happen, what's happening in the spiritual realm. See, because even though we're told, as we're going to see what happens in the natural realm with Sodom, I want you to know that all is not lost, that in the spiritual realm, even though the one that comes out of the bottomless pit will make war against them and it shall overcome them and kill them, that is only in the natural. That is not in the spiritual. And that's what I want you to know and understand. You know, even ourselves, yes, we're going to die one day in the natural, but Yah willing, not in the spiritual. Amen? You know, so it's not about this natural life, which is appointed to every man to die once, but it's about the spiritual life of our souls. Amen? You know, and so even though we see that they're going to be killed and they're going to even leave their bodies out in the street for 3.5 days. But after 3.5 days, guess what? They're going to rise again. See, a dead man can't do that. Dead men don't rise. Only the living. See, that's because don't get caught up in the natural and what you see in the physical, because that's just temporal. Even as that death of them laying down there in the streets is going to be temporal. What's everlasting, what goes on is that which is in the spiritual. Amen? Amen. All right. So, now, in Genesis 1, we also see, after it said that there came 2 lots at even, it speaks of and Lot. Okay, and we're going to stop right there, because we're going to deal with this character Lot and what he represents. You know, the typology, because that's really crucial if we're to understand everything that Genesis has to offer. We need to understand who Lot is and what he represents. And the number one clue is the meaning of his name. His name means a covering. It means a veil. You know, it speaks to a covering. Now, when you talk about the kingdom of Elohim, when you talk about his kingdom, you know, there are those who were put in place to cover. Okay? They're the covering of Yah's people. And these are the priests. You know, and this is a very important concept to understand. That these priests, that they are there to cover. Hebrews 8, 1 through 5, it teaches us. It says, now of the things which we have spoken, this is the Son, we have such an high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Adonai pitched and not man. For every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. Wherefore it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. Now we know that this is talking about our Adonai, our Messiah, Yahushua. He is our high priest, spiritually speaking. Amen? Amen. You know, he's not the high priest physically speaking, because the physical priests are of the Levitical line. But the spiritual priests are of the line of Melchizedek. Amen? Okay, so, you know, he's our high priest in the order of Melchizedek, and he is ordained to offer gifts and offerings. Wherefore it is of necessity that this man have somewhat to offer, somewhat also to offer. So he has to have something to offer, you know, the Father. He has to have something to offer, you know. Now, it goes on to say in verse 4, for if he were on the earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that they are priests that offer up gifts according to the law. You know, so, you know, if he was on the earth, he wouldn't he wouldn't be a priest because he wasn't sent to offer up, the blood of bulls and goats, in accordance to the law. Now it tells us in verse 5, and this is the reason we came here in large part, it says, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. See, our high priest, Yahushua, he is indeed a priest, and he does offer up sacrifices, but if he was on the earth, he wouldn't be a priest because he doesn't offer up bulls and goats. Now those who do so, they serve unto us as an example and a shadow of heavenly things. And that's really important. See, because Yah, he shows us what he's going to do and even what he's doing in the examples that he sets forth. It says, who serve as an example and a shadow of heavenly things, as Moshe was admonished of Elohim when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. See, now this is a very important concept that oftentimes get overlooked. See, but everything that Moshe did, he didn't do it in and of himself. He did it according to the pattern that he was shown by the Most High. You have to know and understand that. This stuff is not arbitrarily done. It's in accordance to a pattern of something in the spiritual realm. So that we might be able to understand and see the unseen. So that we might be able to understand and see which our physical eyes can't see. So it's important to understand that. So important, that if we're to understand the kingdom of Elohim, we do well to remember that Yah changes not. He doesn't change. And that Moshe wasn't doing his own thing back then, but was following the pattern which he was showing. Hence, to understand what is, we must first understand what was. Hallelujah. See, and I truly believe this is why Yah has us going over Genesis again, because he wants us to understand what was what happened in the beginning, so that we'll understand what's going to happen in the end. See, because if we don't understand what was, then we'll never understand what is, because everything that happened is going to happen again. Isn't that what Scripture teaches us? There's nothing new under the sun. All right. Seeing that being the case, we're going to take a sidebar. All right, so we're going to take this sidebar to explore this concept. We're going to go a bit further for it's a point of much confusion within the body of Messiah. It really is. Folks really don't know how this thing works. Everybody's like during the time of Judges, they're just doing everything according to their own heart. But so we're going to start this sidebar by considering Yahushua's parable of his laborers in the vineyard. Maybe we're not going to start by considering this, the parable of his laborers in the vineyard. We're going to take a look first at what was. All right. All right, Numbers 15, 25 through 31. My next reader, please.
And the priest shall make an atonement for all the congregation of the children of Israel, and it shall be forgiven them. For it is ignorance, and they shall bring their offerings, a sacrifice made by fire unto Yahuwah, and their sin offerings before Yahuwah for their ignorance. And it shall be forgiven all the congregation of the children of Israel, and a stranger that sojourneth among them, seeing all people were in ignorance. And if any soul sin through ignorance, then he shall bring a she-goat of the first year for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sinneth ignorantly, when he sinneth by ignorance before Yahuwah, to make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. Ye shall have one law for him that sinneth through ignorance, both for him that is born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourneth among them. But the soul that doeth aught presumptuously, whether he be born in the land or stranger, the same reproacheth Yahuwah. And that soul shall be cut off from among his people. because he hath despised the word of Yahuwah and hath broken his commandment, that soul shall utterly be cut off, his iniquity shall be upon him.
Hallelujah. So a couple things I want to point out here. You know, first of all, it is in verse 25 it says, and the priest shall make an atonement for all the congregation, and it shall be forgiven them. And again in verse 28 it says, and the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sinneth ignorantly, and he, when he sinneth by ignorance before Yahuwah, to make atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. Okay, so now, what does atonement mean? This word atonement is kafar. It's number 3722. It means to cover, to purge, to make reconciliation. Okay, so here it is. We're talking about a covering. Can you see this? Can you see that the priests are the ones who cover Yah's people? You know, so that it may be forgiven them. You know, and this is the very meaning of Lot's name. His name means a covering. Okay, and so what I'm trying to point out to you is that he, in symbology, he's symbolically represent the priesthood. He represents the covering of Yah's people. Okay, you know, or the covering of Jerusalem. Let me put it that way. You know, because he's in Sodom, which represents Jerusalem. You know, Lot is the covering over Sodom. Now, I want you to consider this for a minute, because a few chapters ago we went over when Lot actually was a covering to Sodom. You know, think about a few chapters ago when we had that all the citizens of Lot, you know, the people of I'm sorry, not the citizens of Lot, but the people of Sodom. We had all the citizens and people of Sodom when they rebelled against their master. You know, and their master came and took them and took them into captivity. Amen. Remember that? Yes. Their master came up against them. Their Lord came up against them and took them into captivity. And then it was went and told to Abraham what happened, and that they took Lot. Had it not been for Lot, Abraham would not have gotten his little army together, right, and he would not have went after Sodom's master and took Lot and the inhabitants of Sodom from him. He wouldn't have done that had it not been for Lot. Can you see within that Lot was a covering for Sodom? He truly was. You know, had it not been for him, then Moshe wouldn't have never interceded with Yah, asking, if 50 righteous be in the city that you spared, if 45, and 40, and 30, and 20, and 10, you know, be in the city which you spared. Can you see, because of Lot's righteousness, you know, there was a covering upon Sodom. You know, now this was just a prefiguring of what would happen with Jerusalem. That's all it was. When you think about it, you know, it was just a prefiguring of Jerusalem, that is Judah, going into captivity, and then Yah bringing them back into the land. See, and this is important because when you recognize this, then you can also see the timeline that's involved. The destruction of Sodom, the final destruction of Sodom, doesn't come until after they were brought back into the land. It didn't occur until after Lot was brought back into the land. It didn't happen. It wouldn't happen until after Lot was brought back into Sodom. It wouldn't happen until after Judah would come back into Jerusalem. You know, until Lot comes back into Jerusalem. Now, Lot means a covering. Okay, now, we had the temple destroyed again. You know, and that was the permanent time, the time in which it was permanently done. You know, it's been millennia since a temple has been over in Jerusalem. Amen. You know, and so that's just a picture of what you see, that what comes after Genesis 19. But seeing that we're not after Genesis 19, we're not going to talk about that no more. Okay? So, you know, but I just wanted you to see the parallel, you know, because it truly gives us our timeline. You know, it lets us know that what's being spoken of will speak to a time in which the priesthood is back, have been taken into captivity and sent back into Jerusalem. You know, which was the time, during the time, right afterwards was during the time when Yahshua will come along. You know, and he will prophesy of the destruction of Jerusalem. You know, so I pray that you can see the correlation, because, you know, it's important to see that, because Yah's word is, yes, it's that detailed. You know, it is that detailed. You know, now, did I cover everything I wanted to cover in that? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so main thing I want to point out is that the priests are the ones who make atonement. They are the ones who cover for all the congregation of Israel. You know, they are the ones who cover for the individual souls of Israel. Now, let me ask you something, just based upon this, Numbers 15 through 31, you know, could an individual of Israel go and make atonement for themselves? How so? They had to go through the priest. You know, that's a very important concept that I want you to see. You know, because the priest was put there for a reason. And the reason that they were put there was to cover the people. Because the people were not able, under Yah's system, the people were not able to cover themselves. They had to go to a priest. This is a very important concept. And if they didn't go through the priest, you know, then there would be no atonement. A matter of fact, they were commanded not to even give an offering no place but at the temple. Right. And at the temple, no one handled the offerings but the priest. You know, so it's very important that you see that this sacrificial system is that was put in place, you know, in Torah, is simply, all it is, I'm going to try to sum it up as simply as I possibly can. It's simply one's flesh being offered for one's soul, in exchange for one's soul. You know, think about it. They had to bring these animals. Where did they get these animals? From out of their flock. It was their flesh. Right. They couldn't bring you an offering that they stole out of their neighbor's flock. Amen? Amen. They had to bring you an offering that belonged to them. Otherwise, it wasn't their offering. You know, and this is very important for you to see, because at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road is that they were offering their flesh to cover their souls. That's what was happening. When you look at the sacrificial system as a whole, it's just an offering of one's flesh for the covering of their souls. But the process included the priest. Now, the priests were Levites. All priests were Levites, but all Levites weren't priests. But all priests were Levites, meaning Levi means joint to. So all priests are joint to Yah, and they're joint to Israel. Another very important concept. You know, so, you know, first the natural, then the spiritual. You know, and this becomes really important because, you know, for one to say that all Christians or followers of Yahushua are priests, it's like saying all that followed Aaron were priests. The whole of Israel followed Aaron, but they all weren't priests. Yet this is what most believers believe. This is what they believe. You know, they believe everybody that follows Yahushua are priests. They are not. Even as everyone that followed Aaron were not priests. You know, I'm going to try to make this as clear as possible as we go on. You know, first of all, now we're going to take a look at the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. Why the laborers in the vineyard? Because the laborers in the vineyard speaks to Yah's clergy. How does it speak to Yah's clergy? Because Yahshua is the vine. He tells us in John 15, he says, I am the vine. Okay, so now, you're talking about a vineyard. A vineyard is the things that come from the vine. So these are, now the Messiah also said in Yochanan 15 that his disciples, his ecclesia, were the branches. You know, and that they were to bear much fruit. Amen? Okay, so you need to understand that. Because that means that, you know, that which comes from the vine can be likened unto children of the vine. You know, just like if your children within a family tree, you know, or children that comes from a vine, then you see many that comes from one. You know, just like the sons of Aaron were priests, that which comes from the vine, if it's a priest, then that which comes from it are priests. Can you see that?
Yes.
Can you see that correlation?
Yes.
Okay? See, that's important to understand. You know, now, he says in Matthew 20, verse 1, he says, for the kingdom of heaven, and this is what we're talking about, the kingdom of the Most High, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. You know, I want you to understand, to know and understand, Yahushua has hired laborers into his vineyard. Amen? Okay? And these laborers are as the clergy. Now, he has another parable that's quite similar to this, you know, and it's an invitation to the wedding feast. You know, but that speaks to the general population that's invited to his wedding. That speaks to the general population of Israel that's invited to his wedding. But here in Matthew 20, speaking of the vineyard, it speaks to the clergy. Because these are the ones who come directly from him. These are his sons. All right? You know, now as in the other parable, which is actually in Matthew 22, you know, so in this one, it says, so the last shall be first and the first last. It doesn't say that in 22, you know, but it says, for many be called, but few chosen. See, now that's really important for you to understand. Many are called, but few are chosen. And I'm going to try to break this down so that you can see exactly what I'm trying to get across. There were over 600,000 called out of Mitzrayim or Egypt. Amen?
Yes.
But there were only 22,000 called to be Levites. Now, like I said, all Levites were priests, but all priests weren't Levites. So out of that 22,000, there were only 8,000 that was Kohathites, the priestly line. And out of the 8,000 Kohathites, only 5 were chosen to be actual priests. But 2 defected and were killed. And it's a great lesson in that too that he gave me, but not for now. Leaving only 3 behind. And out of the 3, only 1 was chosen to be high priest.
Right.
You know, so I want you to see many are called, but few are chosen. So out of all the Levites, all of those that were joined to Yah, 22,000, which is the number of light. So out of all those who are in the light, only a few are chosen to be priests. You know, the priestly line is the Kohathites. There were 8,000 of them. So out of all those that were in the light that went on to be born again, Father from above, have a new birth, which is what the number 8 means. You know, only those with the grace of Elohim were chosen to be actual priests. That's what 5 means. You know, but 2 of them defected and were killed, leaving only 3, spiritual completeness. Only the ones who are spiritually complete will be chosen to be high priest. You have to be a man and a spirit. Spiritually complete. The number 6 is the number of man. The number 3 is the number of spiritual completeness. You put them together, you get an upright man. Number 6 is the number of man, but it's upside down. You put spiritual completeness, the number 3 with it, it turns upside right. See, because a spiritually complete man is an upright man. But I digress. Okay, so let us look at Ephesians 4, 11 and 12. It says, And this is also, this Brit Kadashah, this is the Messiah teaching, through Apostle Paul. He says, and he gave some, speaking of Yahushua, he gave some apostles, some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors, and some teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Messiah. Yeah. Now the perfecting, this speaks to complete furnishing of the saints. So here it is, he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers for the complete furnishing of the saints. So that first and foremost, they would have everything they need in order to accomplish the goal. Secondly, he says for the work of the ministry. Now, the work of the ministry speaks to the works of the servants, i.e., what his servants are to be doing. And the same thing was with the Levitical priesthood. They played the same role. They let Yah's people know everything that they needed to do. They let them know, they equipped them with everything that they needed to have, with the information they needed to have. He let them know and understand, the things that Yah expected that they should be doing. And it says, and for the edifying of the body of Messiah. Now, this word edifying is interesting. It's Okodome, number 3619. It's a compound of okos, number 3624, which means a dwelling, or a house, a home. It can speak to a temple. And doma, number 1430, which means specifically to build a roof. It's defined as the act of building or building up. But its base specifically speaks to the building of a roof in particular, which speaks to covering the house, which is the job of the priesthood. See, and I believe the only reason it's not translated as such is because of the translator's ignorance as to the priesthood and its role. Because once you see that, and you see that what this compound is made of, if you were to literally translate it, it literally translates into, a dwelling in which someone is building a roof over. And when you think about that, ye are the house, the temple of Elohim, the priests are there to put the roof on. They're there to keep you covered. And this is why Yah gives his apostles, his prophets, his evangelists, his pastors, and his teachers. And for one to look and say, well, everyone is an apostle, everyone is a prophet, everyone is an evangelist, everyone is a pastor, everyone is a teacher. It's the same as to say everyone is a priest. It wasn't like that in the natural kingdom, and it's not like that in the spiritual kingdom. And if you don't get this, then you run the risk of running around uncovered, thinking that you can cover yourself, but you can't. Because that's not the way Yah set it up. That's not the way he set it up from the beginning, and it's not the way it's set up in the end, because he changes not. Because this whole system that he gave Moshe was made after the pattern of what he had established in the heavens. Right. Yeah. And when we're talking about the kingdom of Elohim, we're talking about the kingdom of heaven. This is why these two terms are used interchangeably throughout the Brit Kadashah. It's so that you can know and understand that when you understand the example, then you're also able to see and understand that which is unseen by the physical eye. But that don't mean your spiritual eyes can't see it. Amen? Amen. So this is a really, really important point, because there's so many people nowadays, who are like, I just liken them unto those during the time of Judges. Everyone's going around doing what's right in their own hearts. Everyone's trying to, cover themselves. No one wants to, utilize the priesthood that Yah put in place. And so what happened in the beginning is much like what happened in the end. Because everyone started doing their own thing and walking, leaning to their own understanding. They didn't they didn't do what was required of them concerning the priest, and so the priest couldn't make it off of in the system that Yah set up. So they were forced to do other things, you know. And some of them went awry. Some of them, you know, followed the crooked path instead of the straight one. You know, so on and so forth, and you know, the rest is history, as they say. Amen. Now, also, I want you to consider Romans 15, 14 through 18. It says, "And I myself also am persuaded of you, my brethren, that ye also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, able also to admonish one another." Now, take heed to what Apostle Paul is saying, because you know, this is huge. You know, because Apostle Paul, he recognized himself as being that priest. You know, and when you look at Romans 15, 14, it says, "And I myself also am persuaded of you, my brother, that ye also are full of goodness." Hey, you're full of goodness. "Filled with all knowledge." Yeah, you're knowledgeable. "Able also to admonish one another." Yes, you are. But in verse 15, he says, "Nevertheless, brethren, I have written the more boldly unto you in some sort, as putting you in mind because of the grace that is given to me of Elohim, that I should be the minister of Yahushua Mashiach to the Gentiles, ministering." Now, I forgot to put the meanings of these two words. These two words are totally different. This word "minister" here in verse 16 and this word "ministering" in verse 16 are two totally different words. This one, the first one, actually do speak to be the minister, the helper, the servant of Yahushua Mashiach. But this one here, ministering, I encourage you to look it up, because I don't remember the number, but it speaks to the priesthood. It speaks to being a priest or doing the priestly duty. You know, now, actually in many of alternate translations, they even translate it as some aspect of priestly duty, you know, or being a priest. You know, I know the scriptures do, and some of the other ones that I check. You know, so the Hallelujah scriptures would as well, you know, speak of the priestly aspect that's involved here in this word that gets covered up in the KJV. You know, a lot of the stuff concerning the priesthood in the KJV is covered. You know, now I don't know if that was by design or by mistake. Nevertheless, you know, just like what I spoke to on the last slide, you know, also here in Romans 15 is covered up, you know. So, doing the priestly duty for the gospel of Elohim, that the offering up of the Gentiles might be acceptable. Can you see that Apostle Paul is positioning himself as a priest, and his offering to Elohim is the Gentiles, that they might be acceptable, being sanctified by Ruach Kadesh, by the Holy Spirit. "I have therefore whereof I may glory through Yahushua Mashiach in those things which pertain to Elohim. For I will not dare to speak of any of those things which Mashiach have not wrought by me, to make the Gentiles obedient by word and deed." See, and this is the objective of the spiritual priest of Yahushua, even as it was the objective of the natural priest of the Levitical line of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, you know, even to make the saints obedient via word and deed, that their flesh as the sheepfold of Yahushua might become acceptable sacrifices. You know, see, the whole point was, you know, that, hey, as you continued on in this walk and you kept messing up and you kept having to bring these fleshly offerings, you know, from out your flock gonna begin to dwindle. Amen? I don't care how many, you know, sheep or goats or cattle that you have, the more you mess up, the more you have to bring, and eventually your flock gonna begin to dwindle. You're gonna feel that in the pocketbook. Amen? You're gonna see that, hey, you know, I need to straighten my act out. You know, y'all knew what he was doing. You know, but like I said, you know, this is simply a picture of how your flesh, you know, needs to be made an acceptable sacrifice so that your soul can be saved. You know, now, yes, we have an high priest who is our mediator, who is our intercessor. You know, yes, the high priest, according to the old system, was the only one who can do some things. Even as Yahushua is the only one who can do some things. But that doesn't negate, and it then and it don't negate now that the priests still were needed to do other tasks. You know, yes, there were things that only the high priest could do, but then the regular priest done everything else. You know, so this is the objective of the spiritual priest of Yahushua, to make the saints obedient via word and deed, that their flesh as the sheepfold of Yahushua might become acceptable sacrifices. See, because if the sacrifice wasn't without blemish, it wouldn't be accepted of Yah. You couldn't bring a lame sacrifice. So you can't be unclean. Your flesh can't be in an unclean state and think that it's going to be accepted by Yah. Your walk can't be all messed up, you know, and think that you're going to be accepted by Yah. Can you see the correlation? It's the same thing. You know, your fleshly walk, you know, your fleshly life, it can't be all in disarray, and you think that you're going to be accepted as a sacrifice to Elohim. You think that you're going to be, you know, you say, yeah, I'm a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto you. No, you're not acceptable if you're unclean. You're not. If you have blemishes, you're not. And this is where the priests come in at. He shows you how to become holy, how to become clean. So once you're holy and clean, then you become that acceptable sacrifice. Now the individual is to shepherd his flesh that it might become acceptable as a sacrifice to Elohim by being obedient by word and deed. The priesthood was and is put in place to help the individual Israelites to properly understand what Yah expects of them, so that they won't lean to their own understanding. So they won't just be doing what's right in their eyes. So that they don't be just doing according to how they feel. So that they don't be doing in accordance to what this, that, and the other spirit is telling them to do. So that they wouldn't be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. You know, so this is why Yah's priesthood is here, to help them properly understand what Yah expects of them and what will happen if they're obedient or disobedient. You know, because in this time now today, you know, the average quote-unquote Christian or believer, you know, has this terrible concept, you know, this doctrine of devils, that they can do any and everything that they want and still, you know, be accepted by Yah. And that's a lie from the pit of Hades. You know, nothing in Scripture correlates with that. Nothing. So, that's one way in which the priest covers. And this is why you find this in Yaakov, or James 5:19 and 20. It says, brethren, if any of you do err from the truth and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. What is this word hide? Excuse me. In the Hebrew is kabluto, number 2572, and it means to cover up. Can you see that this is the job of the priest? This is what they do. They cover up. They cover the sins. You know, now, that's one way. You know, but there's another way the spiritual priesthood are to cover Israel today. And that's found in 1 Kephas or 1 Peter 4:8. It says, and above all things have fervent charity. Fervent meaning, you know, to continually do it. You know, among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. You know, so this is another way that the priests cover the sins of the people. Now, it's through charity. But what is charity? 1 Corinthians 13:4-8 teaches us what charity it is. It says, charity suffereth long. See, so the priest of Elohim is going to suffer along with your nonsense. He's going to suffer along, you know, when you keep messing up time and time again. You know, they're there to point you in the right direction, to help you get it right. You know, charity is kind. You know, they should be kind. You know, That's not to mean that they shouldn't also be stern, but they should be kind. Charity envieth not. A true priest of Elohim is not going to envy anything you do or have. Amen. Charity vaunteth not itself. A true priest of Elohim isn't going to be puffed up and exalt himself. Oh, there it is. It's not puffed up. Yes. Charity vaunteth not itself is not puffed up. So, not going to be arrogant. Hey, I'm a priest and you're not. No. Charity doth not have itself unseemly. Does not behave itself unseemly. A true priest is going to behave himself in accordance to the word of Elohim.
Right.
Seeketh not her own.
Right.
Not going to be seeking their own. They're going to be trying to do what's best for you.
Right.
It's not easily provoked. So even though, you keep pushing their buttons, they're still,
Peaceful.
not easily provoked.
Right.
Think of no evil. That's the last thing that comes in their mind. They're always thinking how they can help. They're always thinking about what's just and good. They're not thinking about the wickedness that you've done. They're not thinking about the wickedness that happened, to them time and time again by other people. Because they realize everyone's different.
Right.
Charity rejoiceth not in iniquity. Just because you're sinning and it seems to be working out for you, they're not going to rejoice in that with you because you're happy. They're going to tell you the truth. Hence it says, but rejoiceth in truth. Charity rejoiceth in truth. They're going to tell you the truth. And when you prosper because of the truth, because of Yah's true blessings upon your life, not Satan's. Did you catch that? Not Satan's.
Right.
Yes, Satan does bless.
Right.
And that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that Satan blesses. He tried to bless Yahshua when he was tempting them in the wilderness.
Yeah.
He took him up on top of the pinnacle. He said, all these kingdoms of the world I'll give unto you if you would just bow and worship me. He was willing to bless him with all the kingdoms of the world. Don't get it twisted. He does bless. He's the God of this world, and he does bless. But his blessings come with sorrow, and Yah's don't. Beareth all things. Charity beareth all things. If you're dealing with a true priest, you're not going to tell him something and then, hear about it through someone else the next day.
Right.
They beareth all things. They know how to carry it. They don't put it down. They don't put it down so any and everyone can grab it. Believeth all things. Oftentimes tell people, hey, you come to me, you can tell me it's raining soup outside and I'm running out there with a bowl and a spoon. But if I get out there and there's no soup coming down, then you might have trouble getting me to believe something else. But charity hopeth all things. A true priest is always hoping the best for you. Endureth all things. They stand in the gap, they persevere. Charity never faileth. They never fail to come to your aid, or at least intend to come to your aid, or doing their best to actually do it. They never fail because Yah don't let them fall, because they're connected to Yah. And charity, in case you're wondering, this word in 1 Corinthians 4:8, as well as this usage is in 1 Corinthians, is agape. Number 26 in the Greek. And it speaks to love, goodwill, benevolence. And a true priest will be full of this. And that should be promulgated throughout the congregation, throughout the assembly, throughout spiritual Israel. Because the true priests are simply, they're the examples for everyone else to follow. They're the ones that help show the way. So we're done with our sidebar. So we're going to try to get through Genesis 19:1. I just feel bad if we don't get through one verse. So the latter part of Genesis 19:1 says that Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And the gates of ancient cities were more were more than mere entrances to cities of old. They were the strongest part of the city. They were the marketplace and the equivalent of our present day municipalities. This is where they took care of business. You know, hence Lot was a covering for Sodom, even as the Levitical priesthood were to be a covering for Jerusalem. You know, some examples of gates being places of business and where these things would be transacted, where all business would be transacted, as well as it was also the stronghold, you know, for the city. You know, it was the core of the city. 2 Samuel 15:2, and Absalom rose up early, stood beside the way of the gate, and it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel. See, and the reason that Absalom was doing this was so that he could win the hearts of the people. You know, so he took care of their business before they got to the gate.
Right.
You know, and so that's how he won their hearts. You know, now, Ruth 4:1-3 is another example. It says, Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, and unto whom he said, Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit ye down here. And they sat down. And he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, that is come again out of this country of Moab, sell of a parcel of land, which was our brother Amalek's. And this is where he chose, this is where he was at to take care of that business to get Ruth's hand in marriage. You know, because that's what the gates were about. You have to understand that. You know, and so I wanted to point that out. And especially, you know, consider that the gates were the strongholds. You know, it was the marketplace. It was the center, the core of a city. If you take the gate, then the city was doomed. You know, and I want you to think about that, you know, in conjunction to what Yeshua told to Cephas or Peter. He said, Upon this rock I shall build my ecclesia, i.e. priesthood. And the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. You know, we have the strongest stronghold. You know, nothing can break it down. Nothing can come through. You know, so I want you to be encouraged by that. That's all I have for you today. Pray it was a blessing.